That is me without my beard, yes. Nothing's working.
I got it.
Okay.
The screen recorder's on.
Yeah, it should be. Yes, that is me without my beard, and that is my kids like 2 years ago. So yeah, I'm going to talk about National Service Radiosondes and the how they work, and then how to track them, and then how to reprogram them if you want to do that. So this is right after the annular eclipse down in Texas. Not the big solar eclipse that happened up here, but there was an annular eclipse down there, and there was a college that was releasing a whole bunch of these radiosondes, like one every 30 minutes. So there were hundreds of these things in the air, and we went and recovered one after we did some Aries work, and the eclipse was done. Then we went and recovered one, and that's us having recovered it. So what is a radiosonde? It's an electronic device that measures atmospheric conditions, wind, temperature, humidity, all that. They transmit in the 400 to 407 megahertz range. And then there's several projects that we'll talk about at the end on how to track these. This is another one that I recovered. Nothing is working on this thing. All right. Down in Texas as well. So the history of these things, originally in the 1890s, they were flying that box that's all the way over there on the left below a kite, and it was, it would go up to a certain altitude, they'd spool out the string, and it would just analog record the atmospheric conditions just like if it was sitting on the ground. They'd bring it down and they would recover it and get the readings off of it and be able to sort of make forecasts. In the 1920s, they started using radio-based systems. And what they would do is they would take those readings and convert it to Morse code, and somebody'd have to sit there and copy it all down to get the readings. And then eventually they went to more advanced ones, but the tracking was up to the mid-70s was still done because there was no GPS. So they would use the theodolite. It's the little visual tracker, and then they moved into radars. And so they would just track these things as they flew. They had enough radio or radar reflectivity that they could track them and get, triangulate and get altitude and distance and all that. This is a 1961 radiosonde there on the left. Quite a bit bigger than our modern ones. The modern one is a RS-41, and I have a couple of those sitting on the table. So they're significantly smaller. The circuitry is way more compact, and it does everything and more than what that vintage one did. Different types of radiosondes. So the GRAW DFM-17, which I also have on the table, the National Weather Service uses this one. This one they use if they are manually filling the balloon and releasing. They have some automated systems. The Springfield, Missouri National Weather Service site and the Lincoln, Illinois, which are the two closest to us, both of them use the GRAW. It only transmits at 100 milliwatts, so it's not a whole lot of power, but when you're, at, 100, close to 100,000 feet, you don't really need a whole lot of power to get a lot of distance off of it. Uses just about all the different GPS technologies out there to get a location, so it's super, super accurate, and it records all the different environmental readings.
So are these?
What is the license for that frequency?
It is some government. Yeah, it's a federal government license. Well, let me rephrase that. It is a open license spectrum that for these devices specifically.
So regardless of who owns them?
Yeah. So there's a college, so the Columbia, Missouri, they launch them every once in a while and they'll fly over us. And then it's either WashU or SLU, I haven't figured out who, but they launch them as well. And it's on the same frequencies. The military uses them as well, and it's all the same frequencies. Unless they're deployed, then they're on different frequencies.
What information can you get at 100,000 feet about the weather?
So you can get pressure, temperature, wind direction. So what it does for wind direction and speed is it goes off the GPS pings that it sends out, and it sends out one every second. And so it takes that, and if it's here and then it's here, it knows how fast it's going. And that wind speed is actually really important because that dictates what's happening at lower levels. When you look at the altitude to wind speed stack, it really does play a lot into the weather. But yeah, you can get all the different temperatures, pressure, all that stuff at 100,000 feet still.
So what's the range in which they fly typically?
Distance horizontally or vertically. They can go up to 100,000 feet, and then they typically pop anywhere between 60 and 100,000 is where they
Are they launched from the ground?
they're launched from the ground. Yep. They do have plane launched ones as well. The hurricane hunters and stuff will drop these things in on parachutes into the hurricanes to get wind speed and direction and pressure and all that inside hurricanes. So as they're flying through the wall and then into the eye, they'll drop radiosondes along the way and you get measurements the entire way through it. It's the exact same ones. They just drop them out the plane. So.
Ever any encounters with general aviation on the way up?
The only recorded one resulted in fatalities. It was in Russia, and it was in the 60s or 70s. So it's been a long time. I think I actually have it on one of the slides. But very rarely do they encounter them. The FAA is real good about either vectoring around these things because it's all broadcast. They pull up and can see where all these things are. And then the plane radar will see them as well. So.
Can they be interrogated?
What do you mean?
Can you send a signal to it to have it send a signal back?
No, they don't receive it all. It's a one-way transmitter only.
Is there a unique ID for each one?
Yes, there is. It's based off their serial number on each one of them. The serial, when you come up, or I'll pass these around. In fact, I'll just pass them around now. You'll look and see on the sticker on the front here. There's a serial number. The one starts with a U, and then the other one's just a series of numbers.
Lightweight.
Yeah, they're very lightweight. But yeah, it IDs by serial number.
Are these things actually still transmitting as they go up?
The entire time they go up, and the entire time they come back down.
You get readings as you go up.
Yep.
The highest you get is 100,000 feet or 60,000.
Yep, somewhere between 60 and 100,000.
Readings on it.
Yeah, every second. It reports every second. So,
Battery part of this?
yeah, so there's, in that one, there's two of the 1, 2, 3 lithium batteries that go in the GRAW, and then the other one just uses lithium AA's. So the reason I have the battery pulled on that one is because if you push the button, it'll turn on and start transmitting again. So, go ahead.
So, descent, is it free fall or is
It's free fall.
parachute?
Nope, it's, so the GRAW has a parachute on it. The RS, the longer, skinnier one doesn't. It just pops and falls. And it relies on the remnants of the balloon to kind of slow the descent. You'll see they're also extremely light. Go ahead, sir.
Do you give any of them back?
So the Weather Service wants none of them back. In fact, there's the sticker on it says, "Don't send this back to us. We don't want it. Just throw it in the trash." I've recovered these 3. All of them were recovered in Texas. I haven't recovered any here. I just haven't had the time to go out. Some of them landed pretty close to where I live over in Illinois, but I haven't been able to go get them. But yeah, you can just, I'll talk about the little trackers and stuff that we use, and you can pick up on the signal and drive right up to it and pick them up and take them with you, whatever you want to do with them.
What's typical service life of one when it's launched to when it comes?
They will transmit, depending on the temperature outside, anywhere from about 6 to 8 hours. I've had one transmitting for up to about 12 hours. I could still hear it. So, now it's not a whole lot of time, surprisingly. And that's because the probes and stuff are heated. The sensor probes are heated. The one that doesn't have the probes on it, the one that's still up here, it's been reprogrammed. I took the probe and everything off. It has a significantly longer battery life because all it's doing is transmitting. It's not reading anything. It just transmits APRS. So.
The balloons are helium or what?
Helium or hydrogen. Depends on what that station wants to use. So this is the RS-41. It's very common. It's also remote launch, so it's got this little Connex, little shipping container with like a dome on the end, and it does the entire thing by itself. So they load up a dozen of these things in it with tanks of helium or hydrogen, and it fills them up and it launches them all by itself. It doesn't require any input other than putting more of them in it and putting more helium or hydrogen in the tanks. So it's a little bit lower power. It's only 60 milliwatts. Same frequency spectrum on it. It does everything that the other one does. It's just automated.
Receive sites for these are National Weather Service locations?
Yes. National Weather Service, other meteorology places, so like the news stations and stuff, they can all have receivers for it. It's all commercially available stuff, so they can tap into it and get the same data off of it. But yeah, all the weather station, even if they don't launch, so like the one here in St. Louis, they don't launch any weather balloons. Normally they can, but they typically don't. However, they still have a receiver, and so the ones that are coming up out of Springfield or across from Kansas City, they can listen to those and get the same information.
What's in that tower? And is it omnidirectional? The thing sticking up?
Oh, okay. So the thing sticking up here at the top is actually it's the probe. It has the temperature and humidity and stuff. That's where it's a sensor probe on the top. The antenna is actually just a little wire that's down here at the bottom. So like if you look at this one, it doesn't have the probe sticking out because it wasn't necessary for the project I'm using it for, but it still has the little antenna on the bottom. So.
You just tie that to the balloon?
Yeah, it's just tied to the balloon. When I recover it, so it has that little spool up there, and that plays out the string, and then yeah, it's just tied to the bottom of it, and it just hangs down below the balloon, probably about 60, 70 feet below the balloon. So it's just another one. This one's not used super common around here, but it is used. I see them out west every once in a while when I'm looking at the tracking sites, but we don't have them around here. Pretty much same thing as the other one. IMETs, Mizzou in Columbia launches these, and then it's either SLU or WashU. I haven't been able to figure out exactly who's launching them, but they launch these IMET 4s. And they, again, basically the same type of thing, but they're just another manufacturer. The big box-looking thing up at the top there is one of those RS-41 launchers. So every day at 0 Zulu and 12 Zulu, there's 100 sites around the country that launch these. They all launch at the exact same time, and so they can get corresponding weather data and make a model of the entire country at one time. Not only does it happen in the U.S. at that time, but 1,300 other sites around the world do it at the exact same time as well. So we get a global picture of the weather especially the upper atmospheric weather, twice a day. And this is shared without issue. It's put out there for all the weather services from all the different countries to get the readings for. Down at the bottom is a guy launching one. It's probably it's a GRAW because it's the hand-launched one, but you can see the parachute that the GRAWs have. Just an orange piece of plastic is all it is. The Springfield and Lincoln, Springfield, Missouri, and Lincoln, Illinois do it manually still. Kansas City is using the big shipping container version, automated setup.
What's typical airspeed at 100,000 feet?
Anywhere from almost standing still to about, I've seen it as high as about 200 miles an hour. So it all just depends on what.
Or no jet stream?
Yeah, it just depends on where the jet stream's sitting and where the big air currents are. But you can get almost stagnant air at that height, or you can be really hauling.
So that's really how they model the jet stream?
That's how they model, yeah, how they model everything in the upper atmosphere. Everything that's above, a few hundred feet where they can direct read it is all modeled off of these balloons. So for tracking the radiosondes, there's several different options. These are the three big ones. So there's the RDZ firmware, the MySonde Go firmware, and then the Radiosonde Auto RX. The RDZ and the MySonde Go both do the RS-41s and the GRAW real well. They don't do anything else though. The Radiosonde RX will do pretty much the entire list, and I'll show you those softwares here in a minute. That's a typical day, at or after launch. So if the icons have a little parachute, that means they've popped and they're coming down. If they have a balloon, they're still flying. All the little gray circles all over the place, those are all the launch sites. So you can see where there's coverage and where there's not coverage for people tracking them. The green one that's like up in Iceland, the little dot up there, that is a receiver site that's reporting the information back to the Sonde Hub website. And I have links for all this stuff at the end that you guys can snap pictures of.
What is the gray dots?
So the gray dots are the launch sites. So like all of these are all launch sites. The green ones, like that one and the one up in Iceland up there, those are receiver sites. Those are personal receiver sites. They're not like weather service receiver sites, but personal receiver sites. You can kind of see a whole bunch of them up under there. But yeah, the gray ones are where they launch from. The donut-looking ones are where they launch from, and then the green ones are people recording and broadcasting the information out to the internet.
So
So
it looks like 500 a day.
1,300 a day are launched. So we see a whole lot in the U.S. We see a whole lot in Europe because there's a lot of people that are tracking them. But when you get down into especially Africa, there's a ton being launched down there, but there's nobody listening for them. Nobody's broadcasting or reporting the information back to the website. Same thing with Russia.
How close do you have to be able to hear them?
Once it gets to about, 15-ish thousand feet, I can hear the one from Springfield from my house in Belleville. So not too terribly close.
But in Africa, you've got to have receive sites.
Yeah, that's the problem in Africa and South America and all that. There's plenty of them flying. There's just nobody listening to them. So if there's no receive sites, they don't get. The weather services down there are listening for them, but general population isn't. So.
Why are there so many in the Mediterranean receivers?
So Europe really, they're like, we're big on it, but it's kind of a newer thing for us. Europe has been tracking these things as long as they possibly could. In fact, most of the software for these the tracking software comes out of Europe. The RDZ, no, the MySonde Go comes out of Italy. It's a programmer in Italy that does it all. So it's a big hobby in Europe, and it's becoming more of a hobby over here. So that's why you see a big cluster in Europe. 'Cause like I said, it's very popular over there. Go ahead, sir.
The button-looking things.
Yep.
I'm assuming those are the transmitters. What do the different colors mean?
So the different colors are just so you can see them differently. It doesn't actually mean anything, but yeah.
They're transmitting different information?
No, it's just random colors so you can tell which one's from which. Because and I'll zoom in. Actually, let me just move to the next slide. There we go. So this is the Springfield site. There's the Lincoln site, and then this is the one coming out of, not the one coming out of Kansas City. Orange Dot's Kansas City's launch site, but this one's coming out of somewhere else in Kansas. But they're just different colors so you can distinguish which one's which when you're looking at it, because it'll put the little track right behind it. Like I said, the parachutes mean that they've popped. If they have a little balloon, they're still flying. So the max altitude of the one from Lincoln over there was 1,200 or 112,000 plus feet. 102,000 for the one out of Springfield was the max altitude on those. So
once they hit apogee, how long before the thing's back on the ground?
So they come down very quickly. Unfortunately, it doesn't show the pop on these. Yeah, they come down pretty quick. The time that they're aloft is probably about an hour to an hour and a half, and they're back on the ground within about 20 minutes of pop. So they move pretty quick back down. Once they pop, they're useless for data, and so they just need to be down as fast as possible.
Can you read the data off of those?
Yes, you can. Move on to the software. So this RDZ firmware, it does RS41 and the DMF, the GRAW 17. It does some other ones, but they're not used here in the States, so they don't really do any good for us. This one doesn't really retrieve any of the data. So it can hear it, but really all it does is decode the GPS. It's for the location and the tracking, but it doesn't give you the temperature, humidity, or anything off of it. It doesn't do any of that. And really it's because it's using these cheap LoRa receivers, and they just don't have the processing power to decode that information that quickly. It's quick enough and powerful enough to get the GPS location and the altitude out of it, but then it just discards the rest of it because the next packet's coming in right behind it.
Do they capture the data?
No, it just discards it. So it knows exactly where in that packet is the location and altitude data, and it strips that out, and
That's all it cares about.
yeah, that's all it cares about. So it doesn't do a whole lot. And I have one of those. That's this one right here. So they both look identical. They're just running different software. That one's a good one for like if you just want an easy, convenient home-based one that you can plug into an antenna and set, up in your attic, or even run a cord out to an antenna outside. This RDZ firmware is real easy. It has a web interface that you can log into and get a little bit of information out of it. It'll show you a map and stuff, but it's pretty basic, but it reports it back to that SondeHub app, or that SondeHub website, which is the one that had all the balloons on it.
How precisely accurate is the temperature?
Very accurate. Yeah, these are within like middle of degrees. Like
So
it's,
It would be a great way to calibrate your home weather station.
yeah, It would get you a good read on it. For as cheap and as disposable as these are, they make them, you know, extremely accurate. The quality control is real high on them because it does drive weather predictions for the entire world. So the MySonde Go, it's based off the exact same little LoRa receiver. The software is actually not that different. They just added a couple of features, and one of them is that it talks to an app on an Android tablet. So you can use these to go and track the Radiosondes once they've got on the ground. So that's how we, you know, when I tracked all these down, that's what I was using, is that little LoRa tracker in the Android tablet, and it told me, you know, right where it was, and I could walk right up to it with it, and it would give me the directions and stuff. It only works for RS-41 and the DMF-17, the GRAW. It'll report via the app back to the SondeHub website. So you can still see all the data on that website. It'll also allow you to put in your information and that you're tracking it, and then you'll show up as a little car on that website, and you're chasing one of the balloons, and you can log that you've recovered the balloon from the app as well. And then instead of it being a colored little round icon on there, it'll turn gray, and that's how you know somebody's recovered it. If you click on it, it'll have whatever information you put in there as a recovery. So the Radiosonde Auto RX, this runs within Linux. Typically it's a Raspberry Pi, and then one of the little RTL dongles. So just one of the little USB to radio dongles, the SDRs. And it does decoding of pretty much everything. It's really designed for it to be a stationary station. So you put it up in your house or somewhere, and it just listens and reports the stream right back to the website. But this is the one that will decode all of the, some of the information. So for like the 41, it will do everything. Position, temperature, humidity, pressure, and then any other data that it's transmitting out. Some of them it decodes, you know, some but not all. But yeah, you can do all of these. I don't have any of them running at the house right now because we just moved to a new place. But when I did, I had moved to running this because those IMET4s were being launched out of St. Louis, and I wanted to start tracking those. And the RDZ and the MySonde Go, they don't listen for those. So I swapped over to this Auto RX. It has a little web browser or web interface that you can log into, and you can change some of the data. You can watch the streams. It will track multiple different Radiosondes because they're on, you know, slightly different frequencies. So it'll listen and it'll hear like the one coming out of Springfield and the one coming out of Lincoln, and then one, you know, if somebody's launched one in St. Louis, it'll listen and report all three of them at the same time. So it's a much more powerful bit of software, but it's running on a little bit more powerful hardware as well. So if you want to start hunting these, that website, which again is at the end as well, is a notifier service. So you basically put in, like, you know, your house or wherever you want the radius to start at, and it will tell you anything that lands inside that bubble and give you a notification. So I have mine set up, I think it's like 50 miles around my house. So I get ones that land in, you know, Missouri and ones that land in southern Illinois, and it lets me know when they've landed. Be mindful of private land. Ask before entering. Down in Texas, this was really hard because pretty much everybody fences their land in. It doesn't matter if it's suburban lot that's a quarter acre or it's, you know, 4,000 acre ranch. There's a fence around that thing. and most of them don't have any way of knocking on the gate and letting them know that, there is. We could have recovered probably 40 of those GRAW Radiosondes, but they were all behind locked gates. We only found one that I was able to, identify the neighbors. It wasn't even the owner. The owner didn't live in state, but they were like, yeah, you can go and retrieve this. And one out of, like I said, 30 or 40 of them that I could have got if I could just get through the fence. Make sure, especially if you're going out in the woods, take, things that you would normally take hiking, water, snack, food, or, first aid kit, that type of stuff. And then leave a message at your car with what you're doing and, if possible, the coordinates of the radiosonde, just so somebody knows where you're traipsing off into the woods. I typically leave the bigger one. I just write with a dry erase marker and put in the front of my windshield of my truck so that people know that, this is where I went. And then I've left a couple of these. I've never had anybody call me back, but I've left them on gates, the other little card there. Just try and get somebody to call me up and let me know, that I can come get it. But like I said, I probably left 4 or 5 of them out and nobody ever called me. But everybody that I've ever interacted with have been super interested in, the actual radiosondes themselves, especially down in Texas. Everyone that I recovered, they were glad that I recovered it because every one of them worried about their cattle or their sheep eating it, which is a valid concern. The animals will absolutely chew these things up, and there is plastic and batteries and stuff in there, so it could make them, sick. So yeah, they were more than happy to let me come grab the piece of sky trash off their land. So what?
You recover the balloon too, right?
Yeah, I recover all of it. I recover the entire system, and then I throw away the balloon and the string and all that stuff, and I just keep the radiosondes themselves.
The balloon biodegrade?
It's natural latex, so eventually it will, but it takes a little while. So they don't last super long exposed to the sun. They typically degrade pretty quick. So yeah, the National Weather Service doesn't want these things back. They consider them trash. They launch, 100 of them a day, twice a day, 365 days a year. There's a whole lot of trash out there.
You know how much they're paying for each one?
It is really cheap, but I don't have an actual dollar amount. I know it's just a few dollars though, because they buy them at such a huge quantity.
1,500 of them go up a day, so even a couple of bucks would add up.
Oh yeah. These companies are not hurting for money on what on just volume alone. So they get a lot.
And that's 7 days a week.
Yeah, it's every day. Yep, 365 days a year. 366 on a leap year. They fly these things every day. The only time that they will not send one up is if it is a manned station that does it manually, and there's a lightning storm in the area within a certain distance. Then they won't, just safety, holding a cord in the, that's tethered to a balloon. But other than that, yeah, they'll launch, or if the remote sites have a malfunction. But otherwise, yeah, they'll launch. If it's just raining, snowing, all that stuff, some poor guy has to fill this balloon up and walk outside and let it go. So
If we recovered any, you'd be happy to get it and use it again?
absolutely, yeah. If anybody does recover them and you guys don't want to keep them, I will absolutely take them off your hands. So part of what I do, and that's on the next slide, is I reprogram them and I use them for my high altitude balloons as auxiliary APRS trackers. So yeah, you can just collect them. There's people that have, just tons of them. Reprogram for APRS transmitters. Just throw them in the trash if you don't want them. Like I said, give them to me. I'll take them. More than happy to take them off your hands.
If you reprogram it for APRS, is it using our frequency?
Yes. Yeah. The transmitter is capable of going up to the 70 centimeter frequency band. So that's what I do. So like I said, the one up here, it transmits on random 440 frequency so that I can track it with for my weather balloons. So there's a couple different softwares. This is the one that I've used because it does both of them. And it not just APRS, it does Horus, CATS. It'll just do Morse code, and then it'll just beep if you wanted to just send out a noise. So it could be used as a Fox as well, if you wanted to do that. The RS-41 will, if you solder another sensor into it, you can't use the onboard sensors, excuse me. But if you use the soldered on one, then it will actually transmit the temperature and humidity and all that back to you as well. So you can use it for its intended purpose and actually get some of the data. I haven't done that yet. It's on my list of things to do. I have one of the sensors at home. I just haven't soldered it up to the transmitter yet.
Why can't you use the sensors that are on board already?
So they have not cracked the software hardware interface for those yet. They're getting close with this software, but they haven't got it exactly. Just like you can't do it at all with the GRAW. There's the same solder points are on the GRAW, but they just haven't figured out how to get the programming just right. That one is a little bit more finicky on this software too. It requires a very precise GPS lock, so you have to let it sit there for a long time to get a good lock before the transmitter will transmit on the right frequency. It uses a GPS interface to the transmitter for timing and stuff, so it gets a little wonky. The RS-41 though works perfect. You fire it up and within a few seconds it's got GPS lock and it's transmitting location data right away. So I've flown that one 4 or 5 times now, in addition to the flight that it took initially. So, go ahead, ma'am.
Can you, I guess, put together, maybe you're going to do it in the next slide, how your balloons tie in with these and your interest, or it's like a hobby, but, because they're doing it for weather.
They're doing it for weather. So yeah, I actually don't have that included on here, but I can talk to that. So part of what I do, and the logo was on the front of the slideshow, but I do Midwest High Altitude Balloon Team. So we launch high altitude balloons, and we do it with youth organizations, so schools, homeschool groups, whatever. We actually just last week started this semester's homeschool class for HAB. We have 9-10 kids in it. They'll build a payload and they'll launch it. And what we do with these is we use these as auxiliary transmitters. So our big payload box has an APRS transmitter in it, but we want redundancy, and these are nice, light, easy to use redundant systems. So we take this one, I reprogrammed it, I hook it up to the bottom of the parachute, and it will transmit the same information, APRS information that the other one's transmitting, but it just gives me a redundant way of gathering that location data and tracking it in case the one in the payload box fails or whatnot. So it's just redundancy. We have flown just these by themselves, just let them back up and tracked them, and then recovered them when they came back down, just to watch them go. Like I said, this one's been up at least 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 or 7, on different balloons. So in addition to the one that it flew on before I recovered it. So go ahead, sir.
You have to notify the FAA when you launch a balloon?
So when you launch the big high altitude balloons, yes. So yes and no. Technically, if you stay under a certain set of rules, the payload capacity total is no more than 12 pounds, no more than 6 per actual payload. Like if you have a string of them, each one has to be under 6 pounds itself. If you stay under all of those requirements, you don't have to contact the FAA. We do contact the FAA every time. We go through just like we're not flying exempt. We coordinate at launch time with the air traffic control in the area, both Lambert, Scott, and then the big control stations out of the area controls out of Kansas City and Indianapolis, if we're going to make it that far. And so, yeah, we do coordination with all that just to be extra safe. It's not required, but we do it. And they get they can pull up the SondHub website, and it will show our balloons on that website, so they're able to watch it track, and then APRS.FI as well. And then I have a satellite tracker that I provide them that. So they have multiple ways of tracking our balloons, and then we call them back when it's moved in and out of certain airspaces so that if they have to divert planes around, they can. So.
Is it generated NOTAM?
We generated a NOTAM. Yep.
Generated what?
A NOTAM, notice to airmen. So it's basically a warning that a balloon will be launching in a particular area. So we do a launch NOTAM, and then we do a landing NOTAM as well. So we have a prediction of roughly where it's going to land, 15 nautical miles around that. They create a bubble so that when it's falling, they're not routing planes right through it or anything.
So you have a phone number that you call?
For the FAA? Yep.
Is it based in Lambert? Is it?
So I call Lambert approach and departure, which is the same number. And then I call the Kansas City area control because they have a big bubble of the country that they control. And the same thing with Indiana. Indianapolis has one. It basically divides Illinois right in half. So most of ours fly from Kansas City to Indiana control. So we call both of them. Lambert we call when we launch, and then or right before we launch, and we call once we've passed 15,000 feet, so that they know we're outside of their approach departure bubble. So San Antonio, we did the same thing. When I was launching down there, we called San Antonio, and we also call the bases. So Lackland and Randolph down there, and Scott up here. We call them and let them know that it's going to be, because most of ours transit right through their bubble as well. They normally don't care, but every once in a while, like at the last launch we did, Civil Air Patrol was doing training exercise where they had planes doing search grids, and so we called them directly and let them know that, hey, we're launching now. And they moved their planes out of the area so that we could get through, and then once we were clear of the area, they went back to it. So another ham that I know actually works with them, and so he was tracking it for us. So.
You pay any attention to avoid launching underneath the Victor airway?
Yeah, we pick our launch sites in coordination with the FAA, and they tell us where we can launch, where we can't launch. So if but we do launch at airports very regularly. Almost all of my launches have been from some sort of airport, whether it's controlled or uncontrolled, and we just coordinate with them to launch. So, go ahead, sir.
Since I'm literally wearing a Civil Air Patrol hat, have you ever done or have you ever thought about doing presentations like this for the cadets?
Absolutely. That's actually where I got my start in high altitude ballooning, was with the Civil Air Patrol down in San Antonio when I was down there for a couple years. I am talking to a couple of them out at Scott about bringing this out to them. And then, yeah, if you have a squadron around, perfect. Yeah, get with me afterwards and we can talk. I would absolutely come out and do both this and the high altitude balloon. I'll do the whole. We can launch with them. So the kids love it. It's always been a good time. So there's all the links that I talked about. The one down at the bottom is the Midwest HAB team one. But this is all the software where you can get it from. I rewrote the instructions for the RDZ. The GitHub's okay. It's not great. Mine's a little bit easier to follow. The sondhub.org, that's that website that shows all the balloons flying. So if you want to use that to see what balloons are flying over and when, that's the site to do it. If you want to see what civilian launched high altitude balloons, like the ones that Midwest HAB team launches, just put an amateur.sondhub.org and it'll take you to the amateur radio side of it, so you can see all those as well. So, any other questions?
Any hints on how to recover those Chinese weather balloons?
Funny story. I actually know one of the guys that helped recover that. So I was an EOD tech, bomb tech in the Air Force. One of the guys I went through school with, who was a Navy EOD tech, he was on the team that recovered that. Yeah, just join the Navy and go swimming, I guess. Go ahead, sir.
Any of these sites, tracking sites, PC oriented?
They'll work on any, like PC versus Mac, or
Well, Windows.
yeah. These will all work on Windows.
Which is the best one to?
So the tracking itself, the website, the SondHub website works best for that. Everything else is like the actual software for tracking it, like interface with the hardware. There's no Windows-based version of that. It's all either Linux or these little LoRa devices.
So the SoundHub is the best one to?
SondHub will get it, and it'll show up in that web interface, and that's probably the best one to.
With all the bubbles?
With all the bubbles, yep. So.
Tell me again what you're doing with the APRS.
So the APRS, let me switch PowerPoints real quick, and I'll show you. Where's my mouse? All right, so I launched these with the students, and this little white thing right there is this guy. So we just reprogram it so that it transmits in the 70 centimeter band, APRS in the 70 centimeter band, and then I just attach it and we use it as a tracking item with the rest of the balloon. In the orange box, there's another APRS transmitter and a satellite tracker, but this is just a tertiary system to be able to track it. We've had failures in all three of these at different times, so we find that having some redundancy is good because the students want to get their experiments back and see what the results were. I want to get the equipment back because it's not necessarily the cheapest hobby in the world. So we want extra redundancy, and so we just use these. But yeah, it just reprograms and just does APRS.
So do different repeaters around the country receive that APRS signal?
So the one in the orange box is just the standard APRS frequency nationwide on 2 meters. This one is one that I picked, and the only person listening to it, unless I give somebody else a receiver, is me. So I have to stay fairly close to it to listen to it the entire time. The white box on the bottom is the student experiments. So they have a variety of different experiments that they put in there.
So does the APRS help you locate where it goes down?
Yeah. The APRS is really good for us because it gives us a nice steady track as it's flying. We don't get, the satellite tracker only pings every 5 minutes, so it jumps a lot, and it gives us no altitude data that's usable. These, on the other hand, give us a good flight profile, so let me get through some of these. I think I have there it is. Go back. So that flight profile is all APRS data. And so it allows me to build a flight profile and see exactly where it is. And it also allows us to know where to kind of drive to for landing. So when we're chasing it gives us the ability to be in the right direction in the right area versus where we think it might go. So the predictions are pretty accurate, but APRS is nice to track it.
So no lightweight solar panels to give extra power?
Not currently, we don't fly that. So Pico balloons, the much smaller versions, they use solar panels and supercapacitors to power. But with this, it's only up for a couple hours. There's more than enough power in all the batteries and stuff to keep it powered.
Didn't you tell us last time that you spent like $50 on helium alone just to get one of those out?
Yeah, the tanks are $50 a piece, and we use between 1 and 1.5 tanks for hydrogen. We use hydrogen. It's $400 a tank for helium. That's why we use hydrogen. It is much more cost effective to do that. So.
Where do you buy your hydrogen?
So Ozark Gas in Arnold, only because they're right down the street from where I work. So I can swing by there in the morning and drop off the empty tanks, and swing by in the evening and pick up the full tanks, and I'm ready for a weekend launch.
I'm sorry, how many balloons does one tank fill?
So of the 1,500 gram balloon, so the size, that size, it does, so 1.5 tanks fills that balloon up. So it takes quite a bit of gas to fill it up, but it's about 8 foot in diameter when it's full. And then when it gets to altitude at 100,000+ feet, it will be about 40 feet across. So gets pretty big. Is that what you were going to ask, Cliff? Hydrogen. Yeah, we're using the one that can burst into flames. It's not dangerous if certain precautions are met. So one has to be mixed with oxygen. We're using a very pure form of hydrogen, so there's no O2 in the mix at all anyway. And the little bit that would be in the balloon is not of concern. The only way it would burst into flames is if the balloon ruptured right next to a flame and it got the right mix of air before it all dissipated into the atmosphere. So it's everybody thinks Hindenburg, but it's really not Hindenburg. There's a lot more, like, you know.
Still no cigar smoking next to
Yeah, we don't let the kids smoke nearby. We do practice some grounding safety and stuff like that, so we don't induce sparks, that type of stuff. But it's to handle it in this context is just as safe as what helium would be. So. Yep.
Safer than handling gasoline around a generator.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we fill up cars, and it's more dangerous every day. Good, sir.
When I was a kid living in Mojave Desert, we used to find these radio ones.
The big ones, probably.
Yeah, the big ones.
Yeah.
I think they were tube operated. They had a box in the bottom. I think it had all the measurements in it. I know there's a barometer in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then with a big battery pack, and then there was an antenna transmitter in.
Yep. Yeah, those are the older Radiosondes, and those things are really amazing pieces of technology for the time.
They came down with parachute and boxes and all that was still. They wanted them back.
Yeah, they wanted those back. They reused those. All those old tube-based ones and stuff. They had big signs all over them, and if you found them, they wanted you to mail them back, and they would refurbish them, and they'd put them right back up into the atmosphere again.
We were close to Edwards Air Force Base.
Okay, yeah.
They launched them all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure they were launching a couple a day at least to get conditions out of there. But yeah, they definitely wanted all those back. But those are really neat. There's a guy down in Texas that had one that I got to take a look at, and it was a pretty cool piece of technology for the age. I think his was from the 50s.
This was during the 50s
Okay, yeah,
and very early 60s.
yeah. So pretty neat. All right, any other questions? All right, thanks.